Hey everybody, it's Mike. It's Saturday evening, August 7th, 2021, and I wanted to talk about a couple of things. I have some topics here. I actually wrote them down tonight. Sometimes I don't write them down, and then after I do the video, I'm like, oh, I forgot to talk about that. So tonight I think I caught everything. My hat says old guys rule. Sometimes folks ask, what does the hat say? And it is old guys rule, and you can see the hat has been around the block. It's one of my favorite caps to wear. And you know how sometimes you get attached to certain pieces of clothing? Well, this hat is one of those things for me. So I want to start by saying thank you to everyone for all of their kind words and the great comments that came across with my recent presentation that discussed Peter Jackson's, quote, documentary, and I use that term loosely, that's titled Get Back, that's going to come out later this year in November. And the reason why I did the presentation because I felt it was very, very important to establish the true historic baseline, to put a stake in the ground. Because one of the things that this controlling apparatus does is to constantly shape and reshape what it is that you believe, what it is that you value. So it looks to set your societal norms. And one of the major ways that it does that is through the media. So it could be through the news, it's going to be through your TV shows, it's going to be through movies, the documentary, Get Back. And, the historical record clearly shows that that time period for the Beatles was not a happy time. And then when we look at Peter's promo, we could see something that is completely 180 degrees apart from what we know and what we understand to be the truth. In fact, there are moments in the video that I found to be absolutely ridiculous. I didn't bring it up in my presentation, but one of the moments in the promo was when John Lennon pulled his shirt over his knees and he was hopping up and down. And you got to be thinking to yourself, he's a grown man. What grown man does that? It was almost as if they were portraying the Beatles in a very adolescent manner, and so again, like I said, I thought it was very, very important to put the baseline in place, put the stake in the ground, so that we don't forget. It's important that we don't forget. Now, I also want to mention something here. I mentioned it briefly in the presentation. It was in one of the articles I read about Jackson doing the Get Back film. So another film that he did that he got accolades for was They Shall Not Grow Old. And I want to read these two sentences that kick off Wikipedia pertaining to that film. Okay, so let's take a listen. They Shall Not Grow Old is a 2018 documentary film directed and produced by Peter Jackson. The film was created using original footage of the First World War from the Imperial War Museum's archives, most previously unseen, all over 100 years old by the time of release. So here again, we're seeing the words original footage, unseen footage. So the wording around the film They Shall Not Grow Old is the same wording used around the Get Back film that's coming out later this year. And I found that to be very, very interesting. And what I'm going to play in a moment is a video clip from a channel that I subscribe to. The channel is Rick, and then it's followed by 8, number 8. So it's Rick 88888888. It's his channel. He can call it whatever he wants. But I really enjoy the channel because what they do is they take old film footage from the late 1800s and the early 1900s, and they restore those films using artificial intelligence. And it's amazing what they can do. And so there was an upload that they put up yesterday, and I got it this morning, and I put it up on my blog, and I watched the whole thing. I think the entire video is about 13 or 14 minutes. But starting at the 10-minute marker, they talk about They Shall Not Grow Old. And I'm going to play that for you right now. And let's listen to what these guys have to say about the liberties the creative liberties or the creative license that Peter Jackson took when he did that film, They Shall Not Grow Old. Let's take a listen.
Recently, a symposium was held by iFilms in Amsterdam that focused on the question of restoration versus artistic reappropriation. So far, Peter Jackson's work on enhancing and colorizing his masterpiece, They Shall Not Grow Old, has been a role model for this YouTube channel. What we didn't realize was to what lengths Peter Jackson went to produce such wonderful results.
There were some things that were changed completely. For instance, the bird in the sky here has been removed completely. But this area here, if we look at the same area and the new and the old, you'll see that at the back, the trees have changed, the fields at the back have changed, and actually many of the buildings in the village have changed. Now, oddly enough, there didn't seem to be any reason for doing this, but it does highlight the fact that this is not taking the original footage and producing something that is closer to the original. This is actually creating something that is fictionalized, which is not necessarily related to the original at all in certain aspects. So I think that we can be very clear that what Peter Jackson did was use the original footage as a reference in order to make, in some cases, some completely new images that suited his requirements rather than got you closer to what was there originally.
Jackson clearly overstepped the mark as regards the ethical limits to restoration. He reappropriated the original work by making it as attractive as possible for a large cinema audience. So much was changed in scenes that it had hardly anything anymore to do with the original black and white film. So what can be concluded about the ethics of AI film restoration and colorization? The answer is that it depends on the objectives of the restorer. If the objective is to entertain viewers, then there should not be many objections, as long as the restorer is skillful and has truly added value. From an educational perspective, there are also not many reasons to object if the restorer has focused on bringing out details that were hidden in the film before restoration commenced. From a historian's perspective, the answer is less decisive. Restoration should be without argument if the end result respects historic accuracy. The AI should only bring out hidden details that were already present in the source footage, or add new details, provided they are based on fact and not the result of fantasies generated by the AI. For example, there should be nothing wrong in colorizing the American flag, because its shape and colors are clearly defined. Colorizing a flag, trams, trains, buses without the AI knowing what country is actually involved is historically unacceptable. The same applies to colorizing uniforms without knowing which army, rank and/or war is involved. As the AIs become even more smart, the gap between what is historically acceptable versus unacceptable will narrow. However, restorers should accept that AIs will never reach perfection. Proper restoration should be historically acceptable, but reappropriation of footage definitely not.
Okay, so I found that to be a very, very telling clip. And again, this is from a channel that does this type of work. They do restorations. They utilize artificial intelligence to do that. And one of the gentlemen that spoke said that Jackson was creating something that is fictionalized with regard to the film They Shall Not Grow Old. And at the end, they say that reappropriation is not acceptable from a historical perspective. Okay, so again, these are not my words. These are the words of people that do this type of work. So you can decide for yourself what you think of Peter Jackson's Get Back documentary when it comes out in November of this year. Is it historically correct, or is it a reappropriation and therefore not a historical record? Anyway, so there were some comments that came through too, which were great comments. And one person commented that they were very good friends with a person who was a technician for John Entwistle, who was the Who's bass player. And this person who commented said that his technician friend said that Entwistle admitted that biological Paul McCartney died in 1966, and this was something that was commonly known with all of the major bands out in the UK, and I'm going to assume all the major bands in general, that biological Paul McCartney passed away, and that the person playing the Paul McCartney role today is not Bio Paul, but in fact it's Billy, along with other doubles, lookalikes, and so on that are filling the space. So that reminded me of a story that was told to me by Angelo, who was the host of Wrestling with the Future. It was a show that I was a guest on, and we talked about Paul is Dead. And Angelo told a story where he was, I guess he was managing or part of a club back in the 1980s in New Jersey. And there was an evening when Denny Lane walked in with Southside Johnny. And they sat down at a table and they had some drinks, and there were other musicians that were at the club, and they sat down at the table as well, and Angelo was there. And Angelo said that the topic of Paul is Dead came up, and Denny said that, yes, biological Paul McCartney died in 1966, and Denny said that he did die in a car accident. So it's interesting how this information is converging, and the reason why it's converging is because of channels like mine where we talk about the topic, and there are people that are out there that have information, and we get to share it that way. It's like the information I received about Ronnie Verrill, the great studio musician out of the UK, and I was contacted by a person who had actually been writing to me for a while, and after I released my presentation, Did the Beatles Write All Their Own Music? They wrote me and they said, well, Mike, now that the cat is out of the bag, and that's an exact quote, they explained to me that Ronnie Verrill, who was a very close family member, Ronnie is passed now, did indeed play on Beatle records. He was the drummer on Beatle tracks. So we know Andy White drummed on Beatle tracks. P.S. I Love You and Love Me Do. The official narrative tells us that. And I have always said that if George Martin hired Andy White for those two songs, you can bet your bottom dollar that Andy White didn't just play on two songs. He was hired to do session work for an entire album or a number of albums. And then we have Bernard Purdie coming out saying that he drummed on 21 songs over the early period, 1962 through 1966. And then I had my source come forth, who was, like I said, knew Ronnie Verrill very, very well, also drummed on the recorded Beatle tracks. All right, so it's this way that information comes together, and we're able to piece the truth together. Now, what I want to do to end this video is to play a clip. I think it's from 1987 because the interview is an Australian interview, and they're talking to George Harrison, and it's when his Cloud 9 album came out, which is an album that I really do enjoy, and it is an album that Jeff Lynne produced. And this clip is interesting because this is the one where it was altered, where we have George saying fall instead of Paul. And in reality, I have the original clip. He's not saying fall. He's saying Paul. But the reason why I want to tack this on to the end of this video is because it's another example, as you listen to George, where he's explaining that the relationship between himself and Billy, Paul McCartney, it wasn't great. There was still some tension there, and so it wasn't this very warm, cuddly type of relationship. There wasn't a lot of camaraderie there. You'll hear George say that, they get along, but, you get the point. So let me leave you with that, okay? And thanks for listening, and the comment section is open. You guys have a great evening, and take care.
And yet we had the Hall of Fame, the reunion of you and Ringo there, and Paul McCartney didn't turn up for that one, and he sent a telegram saying that he thought it was a fake reunion and he'd feel like a hypocrite going.
Well, unfortunately, Paul is a hypocrite sometimes when, because right before we had that Hall of Fame thing, we were, we'd not been friends for a number of years, and we spent a long time really getting to know each other again, and it was so sad, really, that Paul should use an old business kind of thing and superimpose it on that situation of the Hall of Fame. And it's sad, really, that he's like that, but it is really sad because we spent a long time this last year and the early part of well, just the end of the year, right before I came away from London, we had lots of dinners and meetings, and we were all really on a great course, which we still are on a business sense, of solving every problem we ever had finally after all these years. And it was just a shame that Paul should use like a sort of political sort of situation, because I think all he's done is miss a great night out, miss meeting Little Richard and all the old guys and Dylan, and also I think he put another nail in his own coffin as far as him as a person, because, you know, as Bob Dylan said at the Hall of Fame, love and peace is one thing, but we all have to have forgiveness too.
It's hard for Australians, I'm sure, when you think of the Beatles' tours to Australia, it's hard for an Australian to believe that you three guys who remain don't get on. I mean, you were so much a team.
No, but we do get on. I mean, at this point in time, I'm the closest I've been with Paul now for, say, the last 10, 12 years. And that's why it seems so silly what he did. But in spite of that, I still love him, and it doesn't matter. I'm going to continue my friendship with him regardless of his attitude, because I don't have time to screw around anymore, you know?
But you see a lot of Ringo, don't you, obviously?
I see a lot of Ringo. I see a lot of some other musicians who are, you know, good friends. Sure. It was unfortunate because also I know Paul's wife Linda was cursing. She wanted badly to go to that show, and I think Paul did too. Maybe he was badly advised by somebody. I
don't expect you to go into the finances of it, the details, but is it really, you know, a question over $1 million or $100 million? Is that the sort of thing?
It's not really to do with anything like that. It's a much more subtle thing than that. But it's, as I say, we've had difficulties with the record company we used to be with, or that the Beatles are still with. And at this point in time, we're right on the, for the first time really in 10 years of solving all those problems. Now everybody's talking and it looks like it's all going to be solved. The personal problem Paul had, which was not actually his problem, it was mine and Ringo, because if you want to know, Paul got extra money off Beatle records that we didn't get when we always agreed that we'd all get it equal. So that was the one thing that we had to do something in order to make sure that we got equal to Paul because of what the history should show. And it was nothing really to do with this settlement we've got with EMI, which is great. And as soon as we do that, Paul will be free of any problem he may have of us. But, you know, one way of doing that is working together, and it's unfortunate that he, you know, he's just sort of a bit foolish, I think.
I didn't think you were down to your last quid.
No, I'm not.
Can I ask you, where were you when you heard that John Lennon had been killed?
I was in bed asleep. You know, it was sort of about, I think, about 4 a.m. in London time.
But when you were told?
Yeah, that's when I was told. The phone call came through about 4 or 5 a.m.
Can I ask you what the reaction was? I'm obviously shocked, but I mean, could you believe it?
Well, at first I just thought, well, maybe it was just a flesh wound or something, but, you know, it was obviously that it was more serious than that. You know, I mean, what does anybody do? You just, I just sort of thought, you know, oh God, and went back to sleep again, or tried to.
You have a line in one of the songs on this this new album saying that you say, I got out of the line of fire.
No, that's nothing to do with, you know, people getting assassinated. It meant, you know, like now, this is sort of the line of fire. Me sitting live on a satellite talking to Australia with you asking me about why Paul didn't show up. That's the kind of line of fire I was referring to.
Well, critics have been very good about the album, and what they keep saying, I've read a dozen or so reviews now, and they keep saying that you appear to be laid back, you appear to be relaxed, you appear to be comfortable, you appear to be in fine voice. Are you?
I appear to be.
And are you?
Yeah, I feel good, you know, I feel fine.
There's a line that you've got to get in one of the other songs, which is on the album, that not the wreck. You say that I'm not the wreck of the Hesperus. Yeah. I feel more like the wall of China. I can rock as good as Gibraltar.
Yeah.
You're just getting better?
Or as, pardon?
You're just getting better as you get older.
It is. I think it is, definitely. You know, everything gets easier. I'm less worried about stuff. And I think worries and paranoias and things like that just get in the way, you know. And I seem to have got shut of a lot of that out of my system, and consequently I feel better. As to the performing and singing, being in better voice, I tell you, Jeff Lynne, who co-produced the album with me, has got such a good voice that it made me really want to try hard, to do some decent vocals. And I think they're sort of quite good, not bad anyway. And I think it's the reason of Jeff being there, during the production that helped me try harder.
I must say it's a great album. Every time I have it on a cassette in the car, and every time the more I play it, the more I like it. There is a quote. I know that we've taken your time this afternoon, but there is a quote again of you saying that I have to be more ordinary than ordinary people are. Why do you have to be more ordinary?
Well, because we all have concepts of each other, and the concept is that somebody see me on a plane or in the street or something, and they immediately they remember all this Beatles stuff, and they have this concept of me as that person. But in reality, I don't go around thinking of myself as George Harrison, the Beatle, or whatever. I do now because I'm on the television, but normally I'm just like you, just like everybody else. I'm just a human, and sometimes you have to, rather than just be ordinary, you have to, make an effort to be more ordinary, in as much as that they will calm down and try to see that there's actually a person in here other than this big myth about the Beatles. That's all.
Is it good to get your own words down on paper and put them out on record so that your songs are there? Is that a therapeutic thing?
I think it's a nice feeling. I think for anybody who writes, whether it be a letter or a postcard or a song or a book or, it's nice to be able to get something down and get it out of your system or pass some information on to other people.
George, thank you for your time. It's good to have you back again. The album is Cloud 9, and with George Harrison's latest, and as we say, there's a release of what will be number one in Australia shortly, the new single. But would you please thank George Harrison for us?
Thank you. Thanks, Gary. Nice to be on the show.
We thank you, George, very much indeed. I didn't mean to pry with questions about Paul and so on, but we do have such fond memories of the four of you out here.
That's okay. That's okay. Are we still on the air?
We are, but so let's say nothing else. That's
No, that's okay. I don't care. It's everything's cool.